Hello, our truth warriors. Today's guest is a Pfizer whistleblower, as well as an investigative reporter for Project Veritas, and now a double agent in order to talk with us today. What we'll discuss today is probably fairly believable, but what makes it so scary is the fact it's actually true, and the lies and deception in the system has done everything in its power to hide this. Welcome to the Atlantic Underground podcast. Justin Leslie, how are you today, sir?
I'm great, Chris. Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to our chat and
Yeah.
nice little intro. Yeah, this stuff is definitely believable, but it's shocking once you hear it's true,
Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
because it's literally just been my life.
Yeah, it's been quite the roller coaster ride for you. I'm well aware of that. Now you have you were studying and the master's degree in pharmaceutical and biomedical sciences. Can you tell us how you ended up working at Pfizer and let the people know watching today what transcribed from coming out of college and getting into this role that you were in?
Sure thing. So I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Rhode Island, which is like a top 25 college of pharmaceutical program. That was in my undergrad. So I wasn't a PharmD. I wasn't training to be a pharmacist. Some people have asked me that, so I'll clarify that. No, I was not becoming a pharmacist. And then COVID happened in, COVID hit, right? We'll put that in quotations
Yeah.
where it was March of 2020. I was on spring break, and then like we got back from all that, and then Zoom University like right away. So I got a taste of what Zoom University is essentially just doing this, except you're learning for what 4 or 5 college courses all at once. So it was kind of miserable. I couldn't find a job once I graduated. I wasn't able to walk down the aisle with my fellow classmates at all, which was just really crazy. And so I studied for the GRE instead of finding a job. Like I was applying to jobs while studying for the graduate record exam. And I applied to Rutgers University because I had interest in working with the professor there, Gabriella D'Arcangelo, who is the head of the biology department for undergrads, but she also has like a master's program, PhD level lab where she does all this really cool bench lab research. And so I wanted to research with her actually on this dis-ease that I have called tuberous sclerosis complex that I was diagnosed with when I was 10. It's really, I call it my gift from God in the sense that it's caused me to be a huge critical thinker and really want to get to the root cause of anything and everything, like cancer to this. Like TSC actually is closely linked to cancer. It's the creation of benign tumors in all organs of the body versus cancer. We're dealing with malignancy. So I got into Rutgers, and again, it was Zoom University. And so I was pretty miserable again, not gonna lie. It was a situation where I felt like I had to be doing something, and I was almost like just digging my grave more. Like once I started really waking up to what COVID was, and it was a complete scam. In the middle of my program, I was paying attention to the alternative media and watching one thing that really helped me in my awakening was watching Plandemic 2 actually by Mickey Willis. And I went down all the patents, wrote up a whole entire research paper called COVID-19 Uncovered. It was I think over 10 pages long originally, and I had to cut it. But it basically just it described the lockstep agenda where they were saying, oh, that this virus is coming from a lab and all that, and I was still I bought into virology at that point still.
Yeah.
uh, but I mean, I basically outlined this lockstep agenda. I showed how they literally want to tie this whole thing to like a cryptocurrency blockchain, like internet of bodies type system, which I mean,
Yeah.
it feels like that's their agenda, right? That's what Agenda 2030 is, Agenda 21, and outlining that whole simulation and then just saying, how is it a coincidence that they did a simulation like what, 6 months prior to this, quote unquote outbreak? And I really woke up to it, and there was nobody really else like me except for one other classmate, from my understanding. I mean, I didn't get that well connected with my master's students because it was all just through the screen. So it was kind of like jumping through matrices to really understand like who is who, like who is wearing the mask, who is, buying into this, and who is questioning everything. So I went through my whole M1 program, or whole, not whole M1 program. I went through half of it for a whole semester. And then I said I wanted to become a part-time master's student and look for a job in the biotech, biomed, biopharma, whatever you want to call it, pharmaceutical field. I was ready to work for big pharma. And I really didn't want to work for Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson and Johnson. I really actually made that clear to my mom and my sister. Like I got into fights about it, like in November and December with them. I was like, there is no way I would work for one of these companies. Like, do you not see what's playing out, with this mass vaccine rollout in the matter of 9 months? I thought it was ridiculous.
Oh,
After going to school and learning about clinical trials, FDA, how it takes 20 years sometimes for a vaccine literally to get rolled out, and they still, you know, throw them out, like millions, if not billions of dollars of research going to waste.
yeah.
So in order to seeing how fast it played out with COVID, my jaw was dropping, in real time. And maybe it was a good thing, right? I mean, in the sense that I just got out of this schooling and I was just really concerned. I was surprised that more young people like in my program were not more concerned. So I ended up at Pfizer because they were the only company of the four that I interviewed with that offered me a role. And I still was like I really didn't want to work there. But they offered me the job through Mindlance Incorporated, who is a consulting agency. And they said, Justin, we're going to offer you this job. And I was really hesitant at first. I didn't take it the first day. I didn't take it over the phone. I said, okay, can we figure out if I have to get vaccinated? And I still need to think about it. Basically told them I need to reach out to the other organizations that interviewed with me, and you know it basically just bought me a little more time, and I took it at the 23rd hour. And the job was Pfizer formulation analytical scientist, meaning I was working in formulation, so like what the ingredients are, and in the analytics, I was doing a bunch of analytical testing for uh, research and development on small scale level for the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, as well as the modified RNA flu vaccines and the self-amplifying RNA flu vaccines. So we can get into that a little bit.
Now, the paper you wrote, COVID-19 Uncovered, is that something that you gave to your peers at the university?
I gave it to my professor, Dr. Bill Welsh.
How was that received?
He actually gave me 100, believe it or not. I was shocked. I thought it was like this might be my ticket out of this university. And he said, great job lining all this out. Good job, Justin. So,
Yeah,
maybe he was based in a way, maybe he was asking the right questions too, and maybe that's why or maybe it opened up his eyes.
right.
I don't
Yeah,
think the professors ended up getting mandated, so maybe some of them did not, fall victim to it.
yeah. You mentioned a minute ago, obviously, about the speed of the rollout of this vaccine. Now, once you were at Pfizer, did anyone ever mention, or was there any evidence that this vaccine was being prepared way before the actual COVID hit? Is this something that was pretty evident, has had a lot of time put into it prior to it supposedly being rolled out under a warp speed program?
That's a great question, and I don't have any direct evidence to that, but what I do know is from going to work at Pfizer, obviously, I had to get trained in everything, and it really started to sink in that this thing at least could have been planned. Because I mean, if you go to the conversation that I had with Conwall Gill, my old manager who, I don't think she's necessarily like she has any evil malice, you know, horrible horrible feelings towards the world inside of her. I'm not saying that, but like she lines out a criminal conspiracy essentially in my mind of the conversation that we had inside Pfizer where it's dated October 6th of 2021 and I was asking her about the ethics of, putting boosters inside people and like how is this safe? Why does it have to be a booster for us when all these other countries aren't even double vaxxed yet? Just asking basic lollipop questions and then, dug into the actual nitty gritty where she was saying that Pfizer and Moderna used the emergency use authorization because of, the scamdemic
Yeah.
COVID-19 being a novel virus, according to the media and the government. They were using this emergency use authorization to get through it now with this mRNA technology. And so if you do all the research and look into the timelines with everything, Moderna's been around for over 10 years and they could never get their mRNA technology approved at all, right?
Yeah.
Because they're essentially a DARPA project, I believe, through the DoD, but they could never get past even like phase one trials, I'm pretty sure, because the technology itself is seen dangerous and it caused a multitude of side effects, or what I like to call direct effects.
Mhm.
Kamal also goes on to outline how this technology has been around for over 50 years and it could never get approved due to this issue with the side effects.
Yeah.
And then she also outlines how Ugur Sahin and Catherine Jensen, a vice president of research and development at Pfizer, was called. They got on the phone. Ugur goes, "Hey, Catherine, I have this RNA technology over here overseas at BioNTech. I need help making it big." And Catherine goes, "Of course, I can help you make it big. We're the biggest pharmaceutical company in the world."
Yeah.
And so that happened in 2018. So I just find it a huge coincidence that in 2018, Pfizer started working on mRNA technology on flu shots, but they didn't have a novel virus at the time in order to essentially fearmonger the public into taking it, So I find that a huge coincidence. And then, you call this SARS-CoV-2 COVID, and it's literally certificate of vaccination ID. The first letter of the alphabet is A or one, and then the ninth is I. It's all just, you know,
Yeah.
all these coincidences. And so, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't go on
No,
too much
no,
tangent.
it's fine. You mentioned DARPA just a second ago there. DARPA received 65 million from the government to develop this CRISPR technology. Now, this CRISPR technology, was there any signs or any reason that you would have to believe that this CRISPR technology was actually put into the vaccine and that the whole rollout of the vaccine system was nothing to do with a virus? It's likely that they made the virus up just to create the fear to push this out. And the likelihood is that the whole reason behind 70% of the population supposedly taking these shots is just to have a delivery method for this CRISPR technology, the nanotechnology that they are now looking forward to activating at some point within people. And maybe the deaths that we're seeing is just unfortunate reactions to this being in the body and the body not liking it. What's your thoughts on that in regards to CRISPR and the DARPA tech?
Yeah, I have to agree with what you're saying that it feels like it was this huge bait and switch in a sense where the powers that be unfortunately fearmongered the masses into taking this injection that is not a vaccine. It's this mRNA technology. And I mean, I was even asking these questions. I wasn't asking whether it's CRISPR. I was asking, is this gene therapy essentially to my higher ups, and they were saying that it wasn't. But I mean, they also could have been lying through their teeth,
Yeah,
so I don't have any like straight up documentation saying like this is CRISPR technology instead of um, you know, instead of just a regular vaccine. But from my understanding, like that's what it really is looking like, especially when you go into patented technology, I think back from 2004 that has to do with CRISPR and has to do with a drug delivery system. It has the same exact ingredients as this mRNA vaccine technology that they're calling it, So, and I attribute that knowledge and learning from that from Dr. Ana Maria Oliva, down in Mexico is where she's at. She was on the end of COVID. I'm sure you're familiar with the end of COVID a little bit, and she has this great episode 3 of the end of COVID, where she goes in depth on the Internet of Bodies, explains how this technology is not necessarily new, like graphene and graphite oxide are really in a lot of things like soaps and shampoo and things like that.
yeah,
I just don't think it's really to the extent of what is in these vials. Like there have been some people reporting that it's 99% graphene oxide. Some people are saying there's no graphene oxide in it at all. So I also attribute that to Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson and Johnson, all these big pharma companies, and the powers that be, the puppet masters behind the scenes, probably put graphene oxide in maybe 20 to 40% of the lots, and then left 40 to 60% completely, just saline essentially.
yeah,
And then there were other ones that, who knows? I mean, I don't know. Those percentages don't add up to 100, but I feel like there were probably 3 different technologies that they were all trying at once at this point. Um, and so, I don't have any direct evidence that it was this CRISPR technology, but based off of, just accumulating information over the last 3 years, it seems like we were entirely played. And so, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, we could go into luciferase and
yeah.
of that and how it ties in with graphene. I've
Definitely.
spoken many times to Melissa McAtee, if you've heard of her. She was a Pfizer whistleblower as well through Project Veritas,
Right.
and she was very worried about like the vials themselves glowing on the bench. And so
Yeah,
she was a QA, and I remember her story when I was on the inside of Pfizer, still working with Project Veritas, and she had actually had to go out on her own and talk about luciferase and how these vials glowed.
yeah.
And I'm not the first person to say this. She is, but I'm backing up her claims in the sense that I also do feel that these vials glow, and I have pictures of them. There's this bioluminescence about them, and it's really scary, like why is this solution glowing? And then, I'm not
People need to
there's
know as well with luciferase, this is the same enzyme, this bioluminescent enzyme that is found in the likes of fireflies and jellyfish and things like that have this glow to them. Now, with luciferase, and I still haven't got to the bottom of this, I can't understand why it was put into these vials and what its purpose was for. Do we know? Did we ever get to the bottom of what the purpose of using luciferase is?
I have an answer for that, yes. So I have some documentation that shows where the lipid nanoparticle distribution of the lipid nanoparticle distributions, and their LMP 0159 and LMP it's ALC01, excuse me. ALC 0131. No, I'm getting them wrong. ALC 03-159, and I forget the other one off the top of my head, but I've
Yeah,
been good with that in most interviews. But yeah, the ALCs, they're lipid nanoparticles, and they're actually carcinogenic. But um, in this chart that is now public, it shows the distribution of these lipid nanoparticles through the use of luciferase as to where they go throughout these Wisterhahn rats in animal studies. So this distribution is not possible without the use of the luciferase enzyme, as the luciferase enzyme is able to go inside the lipid nanoparticles, and then you put these rats under a black light, and then you can just essentially see the biodistribution and where all these concentrations are going throughout the bodies of the rats. And so same thing goes for humans, and it's not necessarily saying that luciferase is causing harm, I think, directly to people, but it shows the distribution of lipid nanoparticles exactly where they're supposed to go and into people. And so that was used in animal studies, and it's not confirmed that it was used in the research and development in people, but I've also, done my research on the back pages of the internet, gone on to, doing BitChute searches and things of that nature, or, using my own unique search engines. And people were glowing in 2021 after getting injected, like right on their deltoid, they have this light popping out, and then it goes all the way down their arm into the veins and the arteries, which is really interesting because we're seeing a lot of people that are dying having these long massive clots from their veins and arteries of the white clot syndrome, essentially, so it's just it's so much is going on, like, or the lipid nanoparticles and the graphene causing like micro incision clots in people's veins and arteries, and then creating some sort of hydrogel drug delivery system, or is it? I've heard it's a drug delivery system. I've also heard it's got to do with like polymers. So,
Yeah.
I'm not literally.
We did an interview with a doctor locally here. He's a live blood analysis expert. And what I found quite bizarre is I went and had my blood analysis done, and I've got hydrogels in me. And we're still trying to figure out how the hydrogels are in our body, what the purpose of them is, where they're coming from. It's not something that I jabbed into my body, so we know it's not that. But it's again, there's still a lot of work to be done out there, and to find out a lot of these answers. We still need to do a lot of research. It's a shame that obviously the big companies that have the abilities to come up with the answers for us are not going to be willing whatsoever to tell us what this is. Now, prior to starting the job, you contacted Project Veritas.
Yes.
What were you offering to them, and what were they offering to you?
I was just, since I was so, in the know that I knew that this vaccine was not what they're saying it was. I've, had this intuition of things are wrong. I was paying attention to the alternative news media cycles, paying attention to doctors that were speaking out, other whistleblowers, and I said, hey, like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity where I'm getting this job offer from Pfizer to work on the vaccines. I think it would be a great opportunity to work undercover and potentially blow the whistle together. And they came back to me and said, Justin, that's awesome, but we also can't tell you what to do at all. If you were to take the job and you find newsworthy information, then please reach back out to us.
Yeah,
Right. They were very cordial about it. They didn't tell me yes or no. And my thing was, okay, that makes sense. They can't tell me what to do at all. They're a journalist organization. So I just said, all right, I'm gonna take the job. I literally said to my mom, like, I'm gonna take whatever job I get. So it was just really difficult to take it because Pfizer was the one that was calling. If it was the pharmaceutical company down the street from me, I most likely would have just took that one instead. But you know,
yeah.
I I took I took it as it was my only option, and it felt like a divine intervention, honestly, from God as well, because it was a huge test. I mean,
Yeah.
and who knows where I'd be at if I never took it.
No, no. Now, your employee card that you have, that was seen in your video, said contractor. Does that mean you were employed through a third party company to work at Pfizer?
Yes, their name was Mindlance Inc. And so Mindlance was the one who like helped handle my hiring process. So Pfizer was paying them to essentially outsource the hiring process because sometimes they, need to do things like that, and so I signed a year and a half long contract to work at Pfizer through Mindlance Inc. And I was basically just, the same doing the same exact thing as the Pfizer colleagues is what they're called.
Yeah.
And so they were my physical colleagues, just on paper I was a little bit different than them. I was a contractor
Yeah.
versus, they're full-time Pfizer colleagues. And one thing that actually worked to my favor, I'll say, is that the vaccine status of the Pfizer colleagues, their vaccine status was seen by their higher ups. So my manager would have seen mine versus me being a contractor. My vaccine status was only known to my contracting company.
Right.
So I got pretty lucky because, all that was all dealt with over the phone. Whereas if I was a colleague, it would have been well known to my manager that I was anti-vax essentially. And it might have just created some, I mean, there's obvious HIPAA violations going on there, but like regardless, that's the world that we were also living in too,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
all
yeah.
I had to do, was stick up to the contracting company. Like once the vaccine mandates came down, I was, filing religious exemption and medical exemption and said, there's no way you guys are letting me take this thing or forcing me to take this thing. I'm just letting you know right now over the phone. And if you want to pursue anything, good luck because I'm ready to basically walk away from this entire thing, you know?
Because of what you've done, do you feel you may have thrown your opportunities away to work with any other company due to being a whistleblower on Pfizer? Do you think it's closed a lot of doors for you now?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't see any way, shape, or form, honestly, how I'm gonna work in big pharma or any biotech company ever again. And truthfully, I don't have a desire to do that either. I mean, I've woken up entirely to the allopathic medicine model is pretty much entirely fraudulent, except for, well, I won't say all of it. I think that there is a good use for, in a hospital setting, like God forbid, someone gets messed up in a car accident and you need to stitch them up, you put lidocaine in them, etc. Like, sure, that is a situation where I think allopathic medicine is great, but or in the 1% it can be a life-saving type of healing apparatus. But I've woken up to the fact that the Rockefellers, corrupted.
Control educational system and paid for it. Yeah.
Yeah, back in what in the early 1900s or so. I went down those rabbit holes, so that's kind of why I'm essentially comfortable really not going back. And so I had to go through the 4.5 years of education to really wake up to it, but wake up I did. And yeah, I'm entirely comfortable saying that I will most likely never be working in a big pharma science lab ever again. If anything, I could work in a lab again just for more of like natural healing remedies and doing that type of research if the opportunity were to come calling. But yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm blowing the whistle is because I was witnessing like criminal like negligence and
Yeah.
fraud, genocide, and I mean, it speaks for itself. But I've filed liability for crimes against humanity after all of this is said and done, because I have to put my money, or my words to, money where my mouth is, but put pen to paper. And so I filed affidavits for crimes against humanity after all that I've been through. And so I just, yeah, I don't see myself going in that
Yeah.
pharmaceutical realm ever again, really.
While you were at Pfizer, did you ever get into any conversations with anybody within the company that was like-minded, or did it just appear that they'd all drunk the Kool-Aid?
They all were drinking the Kool-Aid, or it felt like that. when I was on the inside. And I'll share this with you. Somebody has reached out to me that they had some friends that were working on the same campus as me, and they were unvaccinated as well. I won't, I'll leave the people
Yeah,
nameless. They were there and they wouldn't take it for the same reasons I wasn't going to take it. And it's because they knew it was essentially a kill shot or a toxic poison bomb in a way. They were not going to line up for it, regardless of whether they worked for the company that was creating it. And so I just find it ridiculous that there weren't more people, wanting to speak out, but it was also like we were walking on eggshells, Chris. I mean,
yeah,
literally walking on eggshells. We were all, masked up every single day, and it was crazy, because to be that black sheep of be like, oh yeah, I'm not vaccinated, and meanwhile 90% of your colleagues are. What does that say about you? What does that make them look like in your eyes? Like, oh, who is this guy? Anti-vaxxer. It was just conversations that were not had, and I regret maybe not saying enough on the inside to maybe help wake people up inside Pfizer, but you also deal with cognitive dissonance in the sense that some people are just going to refuse. They're
oh,
never going to listen to anything that you say, regardless of how concerned you are. And I mean, that goes to show in my video with Ramin Davari, where he talks about, I elicit him on the booster shots and talk about how this was a real life situation. My mom had somebody, my mom's friend, somebody close to her, passed away the same exact day that they took a booster shot. And the booster shot was only Pfizer at that point in time. And they died the same day. And in order for it to just be a mere coincidence that someone dies the same day after taking a booster in their bathroom, just collapsing, having a heart attack, cardio inversion, it's pretty reasonable to draw that conclusion that, oh, the booster shot killed them.
yeah.
And the fact that I had to bring this up and then my higher ups were saying, oh yeah, correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not our job to be concerned about this. I was just blown
Yeah,
away because
it's all
Ramin,
about the run.
absolutely. But I mean,
Yeah,
this guy, Ramin, he was by my old colleague Bakul, Bakul called Ramin like the head honcho of like the Pfizer formulation on these vaccines. So the fact that the head honcho is saying, correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not our job to be worried about this at all. And then he also made connections of how they were manufacturing it like a chip company analogy, where, my job is to engineer it, literally is what he says. Engineer it so that you keep on taking it. And to me, that was just also crazy. And then he goes to say on and nobody's talking about how when you eat chips, like when you eat too many chips, my heart starts to clog up and die essentially. And it's like, well, that metaphor speaks a million words towards what was playing out with the vaccines. So it's literally not a direct admission of saying the vaccines are murdering people, but I think he must have known something was up
yeah.
in in that conversation. So
That's it. And if anyone admits this or steps out of line, they're no longer in these high positions. Now let's go to the expose by Project Veritas, the one that people are very, very familiar with. I think this had over 50 million views in such a short period of time. And that was on Jordan Tristan Walker. He was the director of strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning. Now, this interview, this expose, that was actually done by you, wasn't it?
yep,
Yeah.
was
Now, he was an employee speaking about what goes on. Do you know if the employee, as in Jordan Walker, is still there, or what the fate he faced after the video was released?
apparently he's still there.
What?
And
That's unreal.
yeah, apparently he's still there. I mean, it was confirmed by Debbie Bernal the following day or so after the expose, and she was a Pfizer insider. And so, much love to Debbie. But what James actually does with Debbie is he's latched on to the fact that she confirmed that Jordan was, a full-blown Pfizer employee, taking a picture of his Microsoft Teams thing and sent it to us at Project Veritas to confirm it. And we tweeted it out. And then she was actually a contractor as well, and her contracting agency figured it out, and Pfizer figured out that she was in communications with Project Veritas. So she was let go, and then she got a huge Give Send Go uh account set up and made like $90,000 off of that, which was crazy to me because I was the undercover journalist who was also a Pfizer whistleblower. Just, I wasn't public yet.
Yeah.
It was, it's just really interesting.
But
Jordan Walker, yes, he was in mRNA scientific planning, but he was also in consulting. He was not a scientist. He wasn't doing bench lab research, and he came over from Boston Consulting Group. I think he was working at BCG in the beginning of the pandemic, and then he started working at Pfizer for about a year, at the point where I sat down with him in January of 2023. And so I bring up the Boston Consulting Group information because his name is on a paper that has to do with hospital protocols. And those hospital protocols essentially outline the drug protocols for remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine, and the other modalities. But those are the two that everyone's really familiar with.
yeah,
And the big highlight is remdesivir in the sense that it causes multi-system organ failure. And so to pair Boston Consulting Group together and pair the ventilators as well with remdesivir. I mean, it was a huge mechanism to actually kill people, and so Jordan Walker was behind that publication as well as, several of his other colleagues at Boston Consulting Group.
yeah,
And I wasn't really asking him about what he was doing at Boston Consulting Group because I only had two meetings to really talk to this guy. And then once James and the team at Project Veritas heard that, he essentially goes, yeah, like we don't tell the public this, but yeah, we're mutating COVID. We do this serial dilution thing with, monkeys. And I was very conscious to the terrain model at the time as well, which was a huge contradiction for myself internally because, I'm a big virology, the pseudoscience guy, where we've been duped for the last 100 years on the truth of what really makes us sick. And
yeah,
so, and I attribute a lot of my awakening to this to, people like Amanda Vollmer, who you've interviewed in the past. I'm very friendly with her, Dawn Lester, Alex Zeck, the people from the End of COVID movement did an incredible job showing how virology is very much in question as to its credibility. And, to me, it's very fairly obvious once you make all of these connections as to if they're lying about that, then they're really lying to us about a whole lot that we don't understand. Um, so that's um a huge danger to me about that story,
yeah.
and so we could chat about directed evolution and really what it actually means. Um,
But did after what happened there, did Pfizer ever try and lay any charges upon you for like breaches of employment terms, theft of the vials, or non-disclosures or anything that you may have signed as part of their nothing at all?
No, I mean, at least not since I've released this as of 5 weeks ago. I haven't heard a single peep from Pfizer. And I mean, I've filed these affidavits, which, are my affidavits of truth. And I mean, I'm calling them out for liability of crimes against humanity. So
Yeah,
I feel that that is maybe one of the reasons why they are at least hesitant. I don't know if they're going to come after me or not. Ultimately, I can't foresee into the future,
yeah,
but I've definitely positioned myself in a way where I'm standing on the truth when it comes to virology. And I think if they were to come after a former scientist who is also young, like myself and want to go to bat on the nature of science essentially is a fraud, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I don't know if they want that bag of worms to really get opened up because, you
especially
know,
in sports. Yeah,
I feel that I'm, standing on the truth, and I'm not the only person to say that virology is a pseudoscience. I mean, Dr. Mark and Sam Bailey, they have done incredible amount of work on exposing this. And I even cite their work in this affidavit. I cite the end of COVID in this affidavit. I cite the work of Christine Massey and her Freedom of Information Act requests to not just all of the health organizations in Canada, but the over 220 that she's done herself around the world.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
um,
Christine's really good. We've had Christine on with Pat King, but I mean, there's other people with free. There's a guy called Paul Westhaver out of Nova Scotia who is incredible with the freedom of information requests, and another lady as well that we've had on called Shelley Hipson. And the power of these freedom of information requests brings the truth, brings the actual evidence forward of actually what's going on. And people really do need to pay attention to this kind of work, because once you're able to master these FOIPOPs, you can open doors up that would never be opened before. And I think that is the way forward, certainly in the way of opening people's eyes to get a lot of information out there that we could talk about all day long. But the onus is for many people will bring me the proof. And I feel that really does bring the proof forward on a lot of things.
well, you tell me if you're a World Health Organization official or a CDC official and you were getting asked like, "Hey, can you show us SARS-CoV-2 isolated purified sample, following the scientific method?" Would you not be running with a publication that shows how you guys do it exactly and how, this is showing that this, invisible enemy is causing this disease in this person? That's
Yeah,
all she was really asking, and even very simple, like she was speaking like a kindergartner and in her FOIA request, like simple, like this is the definition of isolation, this is the definition of purification. Can you show me that this is causing X is causing Y with an independent variable? And they're not able to do it. They pushed her FOIA request for, I think, sometimes six or more months, and that's unheard of when it comes to FOIA requests. Most of the time, they push them 2 or 3 months if they're really hard to get to the bottom of. And so she put them on notice and said, "Hey, since you're not giving me any firm answer, you're not coming to me with any evidence that this virus is doing this to people, then I'm going to publish this on my website." And she did that over 220 times
yeah,
with not just institutions in Canada, but all over the world. And she's also actually done this with Contagion, which is also a huge thing that gets people hung up in the germ theory versus the terrain realm, because people, including myself, like I still get, and I don't get hooked up on it anymore, but I just find the phenomenon of contagion, like it's still widely unknown, in the sense of, we're dealing with the work of Eileen McCusick, and the biofield is actually really interesting, and we have a lot to learn still as men and women on this earth, that the biofield is really what is causing contagion. Like if your biofield itself, the poles coming around
yeah.
and the energy fields coming
Somewhat,
around,
yeah,
they communicate with each other. And so if someone has some toxicities, or if their biofield is telling them to detox, then, if I hug my sister, and she's detoxing, her biofield might trigger my biofield to just say, "Hey, Justin, it's springtime. It's time to detox a little bit." You
yeah,
know, as simple as that. There's all this fear mongering around being sick, and just, then, "Oh, you got to take ibuprofen if you have a headache. Oh, you got to do this. You got to take some Tylenol." And I mean, those are just the small band-aids, but it leads down the road to a lot more evil
yeah.
band-aid in a way.
Now, you became suspicious of the genuine nature of James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. Now, what first alerted you to their odd behavior?
It's been a very gradual experience with James of understanding who he is as a person. And um I think that the fact that Project Veritas's motto is be brave, do something, and you're asking whistleblowers during the midst of crimes against humanity coming out, if you're on the inside of Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson and Johnson, please reach out to us, is what they were saying. And so that's why I reached out to them.
Yeah,
And I was very trustworthy of these people because I saw Project Veritas and James as these muckrakers, these truth tellers, these people would not steer me wrong. I have to trust them with this information. And I was very much too trustworthy. So that's definitely a mistake that I made, is I was too trustworthy with PV and James, and I wasn't making copies of the information that I was obtaining on the inside for myself. So I feel like I got, maybe a little bit manipulated and taken advantage of since I was a young, naive man at the time. And so when I felt betrayed by not being able to tell my story, there were things that led up to not telling my story that were highly questionable as well.
yeah,
So I was provided this undercover recording equipment um, in early October, late September, early October of 2021. Signed a contributor agreement, agreed to work with them, and I had conversations with the Project Veritas team saying, like, this is crimes against humanity. I'm gonna do everything in my power to get a super bombshell story for you guys, right? And they called me their secret weapon, so the issue that one issue that led to not releasing my information was recording consent law in the state of Massachusetts, or recording consent statutes, essentially, because the law of the land technically goes all the way back to the Constitution, and freedom of speech allows for this type of information to be released, regardless of situation. If you are witnessing crimes, which I was, I'm referring to crimes against humanity. People are dying from the vaccine that I was working on. So I have I have the right to speak out against this. And
absolutely. Yeah,
and so um, like I've had numerous conversations with my lawyers, and then another journalist colleague also sent my whole documentary to another legal team, and they said without a doubt, Project Veritas, if they obtained this information in 2021 from you, whether it was legal or illegal, they totally should have done the right thing and release it, because it had the weight and the power to save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people.
yeah,
And so that's standing on truth. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that
and
was one thing that happened, the recording consent stuff. And then there was the state line issues where we get to, I was seeing the vials glowing and people glowing, and I heard of all this graphene oxide nonsense in the vials, and I just really was scared. And but I felt called to be that guy, be the person to just have the balls to provide vials and put them under a microscope and really look at what was going on. And so I met Dr. Carrie Madej in late October of 2021, and she goes on Stu Peters only a few days after we
yeah,
did this microscope expose. She signed an NDA with Project Veritas, but said, screw this, broke it. And I think Carrie had really weird vibes with Project Veritas. I don't think she trusted them, which is why she ended up doing what she did. But then she also, I mean, I'm grateful for it because, I mean, I'm just happy that the information was released and what we saw that night was able to be shown to the masses, because I mean what I witnessed was nightmarish stuff with the Pfizer vials, Moderna vials, and Johnson and Johnson vials. And it was nightmarish because there was this like organism that was swimming around the Johnson and Johnson shot, and the Moderna and Pfizer looked like the Tesla phoresis drug delivery system, where it's like self-assembling inside the body, and it has, it's likely in the bloodstream and it's going to the veins and the arteries. And so I saw that, and I cried myself to sleep that night, and I was like, there is no way that Project Veritas and James O'Keefe will not tell this information to the world. Like this is clear evidence of possible crimes against humanity that needs to go somewhere. So that came out, and then there was an FBI raid that happened a week and a half later.
Yeah.
And it all has to do with Ashley Biden's diary, nothing to do with Pfizer and Carrie Madej and Stu Peters' expose, where they're literally said Project Veritas is working with a Pfizer whistleblower, being me.
Yeah.
So James and the Project Veritas team were using this Ashley Biden's diary raid by the FBI as a huge reason to also silence me. Major, major red flag. And in real time, when this happened, I was like, kind of, crapping my pants a little bit because I was like,
It
okay,
would be, yeah. Yeah.
Veritas is getting raided while I just did this crazy whistleblower expose a week prior, and
Yeah.
Project Veritas was telling me how this was like gonna be my foreshadowing for my episode, but it also felt like a charade in real time. I was like, what better excuse to silence me than an FBI raid? And just so happened is that's what happened, right?
But that
A month
FBI
later.
raid, yeah, that FBI raid, though, obviously, as you said, you're shitting yourself. It's natural that that would happen, and I know that because of the fear after the FBI doing the raids with O'Keefe and his reporters, you reached out to James O'Keefe and you met with James O'Keefe after this. What did he tell you?
He came up with those litany of excuses. He said, if I wasn't raided by the FBI, showing me his wrists, making it seems like he's got cuts all over him. At this meeting we had in Hartford, Connecticut at the Capitol Grill was the first time I met him, early December. And that was a huge reason. And then he was talking about recording consent law and how the vial transfer situation, where I also will say that the vial transfer I wanted to do in mass so that we weren't going to deal with any state line issues, and it would have just had to be dealt with in mass, but the journalism team insisted that we had to drive over these state lines because of Carrie Madej was flown into New York and not Boston, which just really didn't make sense. They were unprepared. They should have done it the other way if they were going to use that as an excuse, essentially to set me up in a way,
Yeah,
or set me up with excuses as to saying, hey, Justin, like this is what happened, right? We can't go back and change anything. So just three major excuses. And I still insisted. I said, dude, you understand that this is a genocide campaign and that people are going to be dying, and that at this point I've done essentially everything in my power to expose this, but I gave it all to you. And so now there is blood on your hands, is how I worded this in a way. I didn't record it, but that's what that dinner was like. I didn't back down. I said, I disagree. We have to release this. This is going to impact kids and future generations upon future generations. And at this point, like I knew the blood was essentially off of my hands based off of the efforts that I made, but they were going away in vain, So
yeah.
and then he's like, I can't tell your whistleblower story, Justin, but you're so good at undercover work that I think you should come work for us. So I was just rolling my eyes. I said, how in the world are you going to offer me a job and not let me do what God is calling me to do right now and blow the whistle on crimes against humanity, regardless of the legal situation? I mean, come on, Chris. If that information was released in late 2021, it would have blew the vaccine agenda out of the water.
Absolutely.
And my testimony itself would have been insanely powerful, on top of hearing information coming from the vice president telling me he gamed the FDA and linking it to the formulation that I was working on, so I could have spoke to it and spoke exactly to what Nick was saying. And they had this FDA hearing with the FDA and Pfizer on October 26th, 2021, where they
Yeah,
go through and explain how, they did all of the clinical data for the PBS phosphate buffer saline formulation, which is solely stored at minus 80 degrees Celsius. And then there is the other formulation, the tris buffer formulation, where they changed the final step with the buffer solution, and it allows the formulation, the vaccine, to be stored at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius after it is thawed from the -80 degrees Celsius formulation. And so, are we splitting hairs here? Maybe a little bit in some people's eyes, but in my eyes at the time, to find out like, oh yeah, we didn't do any clinical testing on this formulation and we're just going to approve this one because it allows for ease of use. And their excuse is it's a bioequivalence thing. Like this formulation has been used in other vaccines in the past. So, why not? Why can't we get away with this? And they said they had the, extensive consultations with the FDA and that they were going to go through with this. And so the FDA approved it based off of all of that, in the sense that they did this clinical data here and not here, but we're going to approve this one because it's easier to use in pharmacies, in hospitals, in these clinics, the pop-up clinics. It's easier to store in those types of settings versus in a -80 degrees Celsius freezer, which, I mean, how many hospitals and pharmacies had those in the first place?
Yeah.
Probably not a lot, so that
Uh,
was it's disgusting.
yeah.
It's really disgusting. And so to get to all of that information and then being told I can't release it, but I'll hire you. That was one huge red flag. And then going to work at Project Veritas after staying at Pfizer for 4 months, I took the job with the intention of getting my Pfizer story back. I really did, and I also wanted to help make an impact as an undercover journalist, but I was going to get my Pfizer story back. I made a promise with God. I said, God, like, show me the truth. And I went to go get the truth back, and then I did. I got this Jordan Walker expose with under a year at working at Project Veritas. I was able to become, the most viewed journalism story that they've ever done. And then that story allowed me to build a rapport with James and my other colleagues that I didn't have before. Not everyone necessarily trusted me. I feel like they almost thought I was going to do what I was doing, which was trying to get my story back, right?
Yeah.
And but it created a situation where there was a huge amount of rapport to be built, and so I obtained my information back from Conwall, and then several months later, when I went to O'Keefe Media Group, I was able to reobtain the Ramin Davari files, and so I was also able to corroborate that there is a terabyte drive that existed, and
Yeah.
that it's
Not 9 terabytes, was it?
well, I think that I misspoke. I don't think it's 9 terabytes, but it could be. I think it's at least a terabyte, though. It could be two.
Yeah.
9 terabytes is a horrendous amount of footage, my friend.
Yeah.
So
But you've been gathering so much information. I
it
mean,
was a lot, is
you've
the
done
thing.
a lot of projects with them. You've gone out and done a lot of undercover investigation for them, which has built so much information, but they weren't releasing it. I mean, you went undercover as a journalist for Veritas regarding the LBGT movement. I mean, what did you find out about that?
Oh, well, so that expose started, or not expose, that investigation is called Ed Camp Long Island, and it has to do with the exposure of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, under the guise of DEI is really an LGBTQ type agenda. And so that took place in Nassau County in Long Island, which, I'm not a political guy by any means, but in Long Island, there are probably more conservative leaning, red leaning type people where, they're not really for this liberal nonsense of LGBTQ, making kids gay, getting rid of genders, cutting kids' wieners off, essentially, is what I'll leave it at. Is so uh it was an interesting situation because Ed Camp was this professional development, free PD professional development, where teachers, students, master students was what my alias was, could go to this free professional development event and go into any session that they wanted to. And so Ed Camp was set up where, if I was a teacher and I wanted to teach kids on how to use a whiteboard, the smart boards, and teach other teachers or teach students on, how to teach their teachers how to use it for like social studies
Yeah.
classes and apps and stuff. But I decided to go into the session called Bathrooms, Pronouns, and Flags, essentially, with Alyssa Waters, who is a social worker outside the classroom, and she teaches social justice and Spanish at Jericho Middle School in Long Island. And it was just pretty crazy what she was saying on we need to get rid of girls and boys. We have kids coming out as early as 2, 3 years of age, whether they're gay or whether they're trans, like they're literally the opposite gender, and they know this by the age of 3. Like
No.
they kids don't know how to do 1 + 1 = 2 by the time they're 3, like they don't, so it was absolutely ridiculous that that was happening in Long Island, a conservative area. I met with David Casamento as well, who is an assistant superintendent, and he shined a light on the how they were covertly doing this in the area with a group of assistant superintendents and superintendents and like-minded teachers on, pushing this agenda, um, essentially, and behind the scenes covertly. And it was just, ridiculous. One of the things that he said is, he's a gay man, openly gay assistant superintendent. He said, my sexuality has always been a part of my work because I, always like connecting with kids. And that just, it really, you could
Yeah.
conspire that that sounds like a pedophile almost in a way, not saying Dave is a pedophile by
Or
any means.
an agenda to which
But
we've seen unfold.
I understand, like, it's crazy if, I mean, dealing with the sexuality of kids is a really a difficult topic sometimes, but like if they're coming to you and you're going to be hiding that from parents and like grooming them to be gay, like that is just, that is not a cool thing to be doing, and especially in that area, so
I'm
we
so glad. I mean, for me, for you, you you just got out in time. We dodged this bullet. We really did dodge this bullet through the education system. But
yeah,
now,
I got it
you
right in
know,
time.
but the beauty is, I think it gives all of us who have grown up in the era that we grew up in, it gives us clear vision that this now is not right. I'm not saying people shouldn't have the right to express and be whatever they want to be. That's fine. But what I do disagree with is the fact that this was a campaign and still is a campaign as big as what we saw with the COVID campaigns. But this now is, to me, a direct assault on the mental health of children.
Absolutely.
We've got psychology books here, and if I go back to one of the books from like 1997, and one of the identification of mental illness is of those that wish to change their gender. And this is a clearly defined mental illness. At which point did they think it was good to take something that is a clearly defined mental illness and promote it? And they have hijacked but the one thing that amazes me so much is they have hijacked the vehicle of the LGBTQ movement, and they don't even realize it. They are going to harm themselves. They're going to harm the credibility. They're going to take the backlash and the blame for this whole propaganda machine that you went in and exposed here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it all really circumvents back to big pharma with, the hormones that they're injecting. And I mean, the surgeries that happen to people nowadays. I mean, if you're 18 and you want to do that to yourself, I mean, I'm a big freedom guy. If you really want to, like, by all means, go ahead, but you're most likely going to be regretting that decision at a later point in time.
Yeah.
But to be doing that to kids that are 14, 15, 16 years old, and even doing it behind the scenes sometimes without parental consent is just absolutely ridiculous. So, I was very proud of that story, as it was real legit journalism. It's not like I put words in any of those people's mouths,
Mhm.
and it's just, I mean, as Don Gately goes on to say in one of the exposés, it's definitely a politically fraught area, this DEI area of, wanting to be inclusive, equity, diversity, all this stuff sound great, but it really is a non-inclusive type agenda where it's like, oh, if you don't agree with us, if you have a problem with us, it's like you're literally a nut job conspiracy theorist. Nobody will listen to this person. Stop questioning us.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
They all think that if we go against this, it's as bad as walking around in a white suit with a big white cone on your head. This is the kind of disgust that we get for pointing this out. It's not going to change the world for the better. But unfortunately, there's so many sympathizers with these campaigns that they will spin it round and turn us round, like, when they call people anti-vaxxers. This again, they're going to class as anti-hate. They're going to say we're homophobic. That's not the case. I'm not homophobic at all. But what I don't agree with is what's been going on. I work for a major corporation up in Canada, and part of my mandatory training, which we had to do every month, was diversity inclusion. And I questioned it. I pushed back on the fact that I didn't think it was right. And what amazed me, there was a couple of people that I worked with that agreed with me that this was not required in the workplace. But this is an indoctrination of work staff in corporations. And this goes to such levels that all corporations around the world who are implementing these kind of training on the staff are part and parcel of this propaganda machine. And, we can see that they're being controlled. We saw what happened with Bud Light and all these woke companies coming out. And there's backlash from the public to a certain extent. But there is that many people sympathizing within the public that it gave it enough steam to still continue to where it is. And it's going to continue to where it is to cause so much damage and harm to the generations of youth now. And it makes me wonder whether it is tied into the pharmaceutical side, because obviously the pharmaceuticals that are provided to children in regards to this, that could be very profitable. But not only that, what we're seeing unfold is an absolute control mechanism that links in with what's coming with the likes of digital currencies and this whole agenda plan of Agenda 2030 and Agenda 21 that you mentioned earlier. And this is to subdue mankind to a level where the big players are generally just there to enslave humanity. And that to me is the goal. And they're breaking down the barriers, they're creating divide and conquer to such a level now that it's so blatantly obvious to me and you and others out there. But the sad part is the masses are going along with it. And other than speaking out the way we're doing today, I really don't know how we're going to stop this.
it takes all of us to keep speaking out about it. One of the other things about this entire, DEI LGBTQ agenda, and I'm not saying it, I'm not homophobic either. Like I have a friend, I have a couple of friends who are gay. I know people who are gay, and I'm like, I don't discriminate against them. It's more like it's the pushing of the agenda by these teachers in that realm of like you're supposed to be teaching, you're not supposed to be like grooming. That's where we draw the line. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would agree, but a lot of people disagree. And they're like, oh, it's the parents, like, well, are you sure? You're sure since you're lesbian and you're gonna be just grooming kids, like that's okay. It makes you feel better, honestly, so it's gotten ridiculous. And, I mean, Project Veritas has done good work on exposing that in the past for sure. But it also it's a divisive topic to be talking about. It's all part of this divide and conquer world where like, you either hate it or you love it. And I one last thing I wanted to say about the LGBTQ stuff and, becoming, getting rid of girls and boys and saying like only men and women have rights in this world. If you're a they, you don't have rights. If you're if you were born a boy but you're turning yourself into a girl, you're literally so fucked up in the eyes of the law that you don't have rights. You're not a living man or a
Yeah.
woman. You are confused, and like that goes all the way back to our God-given rights and the fact that our country has been hijacked and is actually a corporation. And all these countries around the world are really corporations. I just learned last week that, Canada doesn't have its own Declaration of Independence, and that they are literally, if you go to the Duns and Bradstreet numbers, you can find it has its own Duns and Bradstreet number. It's a corporation, and you can find it in Washington, D.C. as its technical address. So, like, what does that tell you? That we have been lied to about many things, and that whole thing with the LGBTQ agenda is to get people sucked into that, and literally saying like, "Oh, I'm a woman," even though I'm clearly a man. When you're that confused, you don't have rights, and that's how they can take advantage of people and enslave them.
Yeah, and the enslavement is the goal. I mean, if they're able to activate something that a lot of people have within the bodies within nanotechnology, but not only that, if these vaccines hold patents, and these patents are given to the big players, the likes of Gates and whoever it is, whoever they've got these patents on these vaccines. If this goes in and changes people's DNA within the body, they are no longer, as you say, a person, a man, a woman, whatever it is that is clearly defined in law as having God-given rights. The moment they start changing these things, that means that somebody can own these individuals under those patent rights. And what concerns me is the development now. There's been some big corporations onto the stock market lately whose business is growing for the chips that they're intending to put into human bodies. And we're well aware of the likes of Neuralink and other projects that are moving forward to tap into the human mind. We're going to get to a stage where people are going to look back at what slavery was in years gone by. And, quite rightly, people are up in arms that slavery was wrong. But what people don't realize right now is we are walking into something where people are going to be owned by corporations under the patent rights. They're going to have chips in the bodies that are going to control them, read the thoughts, or put things in there that are not wanted. And at the end of the day, humanity and each individual human, we already see it with the taxation of humans and the creation of the birth certificate. But moving forward, what's even scarier is human beings are going to be put onto the stock market as commodities. And people are going to buy those commodities up and own the rights to individuals. And that to me is an absolute modern day slavery. And people do not see what's coming, unfortunately.
Well, it's actually, I think you could argue that that's happening today still with QSIP numbers and connecting that all the way with our birth certificate, and how the Vatican really has all our QSIP numbers. And if if you're able to find your QSIP number, you're able to actually check what you're being traded as on the stock market as a
Yeah.
commodity. So I just, it's happening in real time, but in order, if slash when they start injecting these chips into people and patenting them and using this emergency use authorized, you know, toxic poison bomb injection that is manipulating people's DNA and saying, oh, like this was our product, we put it inside of you, it
Yeah.
changed your DNA, so therefore we own you now. I think it could lead to something like a civil war or I mean, if people that are remorseful for taking these vaccines really wake up to that and are told that they're owned by Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson and Johnson, whichever one they took. If you're now property of these corporations, I think that's going to piss a lot of people off. And, they're going to start saying, no, I'm not owned by you. And that could spark a revolution, which could lead, be a good thing.
Yeah,
I think it really, I don't really buy into that necessarily. Like maybe it is manipulating the DNA. Sure. I'm not going to disagree that it could be doing that. Um, but I also think that people, us as men and women, like as long as you're not changing your gender along with the process, and you realize you made a mistake and repent, that if you still acknowledge yourself as a man or a woman created by God, then you will always be that, and you
yeah,
cannot be bought and sold in that way. Or, so I do have hope that that's not going to happen ultimately, and that people that did get coerced and vaccinated can, see through the darkness and get to the light, get to the other side, and just make sure that they're not making the same mistakes again. Really is a huge important thing. Like, oh, we were unprepared for this scamdemic, and if slash when they try this agenda with whether it's disease X, I mean, they're talking about bird flu
yeah,
right now,
yeah, oh, yeah,
bug flu, so I mean, we know it's nonsense, but I mean, the people that got double jabbed or triple jabbed or boosted times how many, they're the ones that really need to find that divine, that divine axis inside them to shift back into living beings created by God and understand that we don't need these toxic injections anymore, and
no,
we don't need to be listening to any of this, so um yeah, I pray that when that test, the test of the next scamdemic comes, that we were shaken awake too much to the point where there's no going back, and that humanity is not going to fall into that same trap again.
yeah,
But I
I
feel
think
like it's going to
so.
be percentage wise, like 20-30% might fall into their trap, and that's all they'll get at this point. And then the rest of us will be moving into the new free world and bridging the gap from the old world cult into the new world where,
Really
we're
do hope so.
big,
Yeah, yeah,
big freedom lovers, we're not really run by money and greed and all of that. Like we're run by on love and kindness and compassion, which we really need right now.
absolutely. Now, it was made to look like James O'Keefe was pushed out of his Project Veritas by the board of directors. Was this just a clever play by him to support from his, garner the support from his followers and start something new and profitable, as well as walking away from the responsibility of being part of Veritas in your eyes?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I can't confirm it in that sense, but from my experience from being, a Project Veritas insider, James's top journalist, right after the Pfizer story, James was talking about how much money we can make off of this, especially if we were a for-profit news company versus being nonprofit. We have to rely on donations all the time.
Yeah,
I That was just one little thing that I noted. And then February 8th, I think, is the day that this letter came out. And was it something that was organized? It totally could have been
yeah,
to just dismantle Project Veritas and allow James to move into his own company, and the timing of it all too is just really interesting with, him leaving. Tucker Carlson was leaving Fox around the same time as well. So it's just, you know, it's that new movement of taking these high power figures and like letting them go out on their own, to each their own now, their individual selves, which, was it organic? I can't give you an answer. I personally feel like it was kind of a charade in a way,
yeah.
where
Because
the
I've
board.
seen Yeah, I've seen footage, and there's footage on your video there of James O'Keefe actually being on stage doing acting, in a theater and whatever. This is he is an actor. So is James O'Keefe a bad actor in the literal sense? Because he didn't look very good on the stage anyway, but he seems to use this to play to the audience and in my eyes, dupe people.
That's what it feels like. James definitely is really, he's into acting. I believe he did theater in college, and there are many connections that could be made to how he got into this position.
Yeah.
But it gets pretty dark once you bring up those rabbit holes. I mean, he's
Oh,
connected to
yeah.
the
I mean,
leadership.
yeah,
There's this called the Leadership Institute, which he's connected to. That was a scholarship that he, I believe, got from Rutgers when he was there. It's connected to Jim Jordan. It's connected to Mike Pence and these people in the conservative movement. James, being connected to them and then somehow, becoming this really influential figure in the right-wing conservative media as an investigative journalist just leads me down many rabbit holes, and he's also connected to Eric Prince, who is the founder of Blackwater,
yeah.
and Eric Prince is like ex-CIA, I believe, and maybe ex-FBI. And so
Do you
how
believe, do you
all of
believe
that
James
happens.
O'Keefe? Do you believe James O'Keefe is controlled opposition working for the three-letter agencies?
It sure seems like it. He won't admit that he works as a three-letter agent. I spoke with him over the phone before I released my documentary, and I asked him those very questions of whether he was in the CIA, FBI, or a defense intelligence asset, essentially for the DoD. He said no to those, but it's also entirely possible, and I didn't get to ask him this, is that he was working in private military intelligence, which is basically like contracts
Yeah.
from the CIA, DoD, or FBI, and that, he's just a government contractor through private intelligence instead, which it's entirely possible. Everyone should be looking into, I mean, the Washington Post wrote about this years ago, I think in 2016, where Eric Prince is ex-CIA and he was looking for like private intelligence operatives, and then he trained James O'Keefe and was able to essentially recruit spies potentially to work for Project Veritas. And they were infiltrating elections, and they just had like boots on the ground intelligence across the country, which is, I mean, it could be used for good, but it could be also be used for bad. And from my situation, it looks like it was used for bad, where I got manipulated and sucked into reaching out to them and trusting them, and then having the entire situation blow up in my face.
Are you currently aware of anybody in the so-named alternative media that are bad actors, that are not working in the favors of people and are actually acting like the Pied Piper, leading them astray? I mean, I look at certain people out there and the stuff that they put out. A lot of people have risen to fame and notoriety very quickly. And there's people that have come forward that I know have had really bad histories in the past. I mean, the likes of Russell Brand in the UK is one that I really do not trust. But the freedom movement seems to have embraced him as one of their great speakers. Do you know of any of these bad actors out there that are not working in the favor of the people?
I feel like it's pretty much all of them at this point. I mean,
Yeah,
the veil is very thin, and once you see through the veil, it like once you start seeing how all of these people have hundreds of thousands, if not millions upon millions of followers. Russell Brand has, I mean, he's also comes from Hollywood, so you got
yeah.
like Holly weird, as some people say.
Katy
Um,
Perry as his partner, we know what she's involved with and come out with, and even in his early days in England, when I saw him, the guy gave me the creeps. The things that he did, I thought were disgusting, and he thought it was in the name of comedy. And yeah, as you say, to get into Hollywood, it speaks volumes.
well, that, and then I mean the fact that these people have been actors in the past. So if they've been actors in the past, can they just act like they're helping the MAGA crowd or the conservative movement and leading them astray? Are they asking the real critical questions like I'm asking about virology, and asking like who's trustworthy in these circles, like and sure, some of them could be organic, but I find I just have a really hard time believing that, you get that big, such as, I mean, even Alex Jones, right? Alex Jones, InfoWars themselves, um, Louder with Crowder, Benny Johnson, Jack Posobiec. All of these people are like in this ring of what I call the mainstream alternative media industrial complex. And based off of my experience in the alternative media, it seems highly likely that they're all in this ring and that they are all maybe not answering to the same person or the same, puppet masters per se,
But controlled.
but they're controlled in some way, shape, or form where they have this leash and they know what they can and cannot say. And I mean, maybe if they say the wrong thing once or twice, it's okay, but they are gatekeepers essentially. And Patrick Berge is a whistleblower from the DoD that blew the whistle on the Pandora Papers and blew the whistle on IIA operations, which is interactive internet activities. And so I highlight that in my film and
Yeah.
how the DoD essentially is contracted out uh people in the media through the government, as and it's the real deep state where I mean they are off the books, you can write all this stuff off as confidential and they're probably working with the CIA and the FBI at the same time to manipulate the media, and I mean, what better way to do it than with someone like James or with someone like Louder with Crowd or Alex Jones? All of these people have a knack of getting people sucked into their news stories and really leading them
Yeah.
away from the actual truth,
But
and
speaking of Alex Jones, I mean, Alex Jones rose to fame because of his infiltration and his video that he put out about Bohemian Grove. Now, James O'Keefe revealed to you, and you saw the paperwork involved with this, the tickets from him actually going there. He revealed to you he was invited to Bohemian Grove. And for those that don't know what this is, please just tell people what it is. Because like if he's involved with that, that speaks volumes in my eyes. Absolutely.
well, that is what I call the cherry on top of this entire story. And so I uncovered that James went to Bohemian Grove in my first confirmation of it was in August, right after he went. And so I was at O'Keefe Media Group at the time. I left from PV to go to OMG. I worked at OMG about 5 months.
Yeah.
And so during my time leading up to this whole thing, I was obviously still so skeptical of James. And then I had two whistleblower stories that are highlighted in Project Whistleblower, my documentary, where um, Kim Witzak and Raymond Bouchard were not able to tell their whistleblower stories in interview sit downs with James. So after Raymond's interview was not released, I found out through some resignations of my colleagues that James was invited to the Grove this year. And I didn't know what to think. I was like, of course, like, how more strange can this whole thing get for me? Like, this is such a large conspiracy now. Like, oh,
Yeah.
James O'Keefe, the king of investigative journalists and king of investigative journalism and the king of like investigative sting operations is invited to the Bohemian Grove, this Bohemian club where what
Yeah.
elite billionaires and millionaires and high up CEOs and all of these powerful people, ex-presidents have been there, senators, Speaker of the House, Speaker McCarthy was there this year apparently. He had a Bohemian Grove owl in this blue golf shirt when he walked up to a podium earlier this
performing
year.
performing rituals of sacrifice to the god Moloch. I mean, it's
Yeah.
devil worshiping
Yeah,
basically.
so for the audience who don't know, Alex Jones got famous in 2003 for quote unquote infiltrating the Bohemian Grove, and he brought an undercover camera, recorded this thing called the cremation of care, which is a mock effigy burning sacrifice of this effigy where they're essentially burning a body, and real releasing their care. I'm not sure, but it goes right in front of this owl god Moloch. It's this 40-foot owl statue that they have that has moss growing all over it, vines and everything, but they do it right in front of this pond, and There's just so much that is unknown about the Bohemian Grove too. I mean, Alex Jones himself has said that like, oh, not everyone that goes is literally a Satan worshiper, but there is some nefarious stuff that goes on there that we just don't know, and
Yeah.
I've from releasing this story, through anonymous sources and through anonymous people have told me that they're traumatized from what they've seen at the Bohemian Grove, and they know people who were guests, they know ex-members who have shined a light on what really goes on behind the scenes. And I mean, I don't think it's a conspiracy like the Manhattan Project had to do with no, the coordination of the Manhattan Project had to do with the Bohemian Grove apparently, and like some bombings from I think Hiroshima had to do with the Bohemian Grove way back when. And I mean, is it crazy to say that I mean even what happened with the La Hayana and Maui fires could have been coordinated at the Bohemian Grove, you know?
Anything is possible because it's
Because
high-ranking people involved.
well,
It's like
also
the
the
devil
timing.
makes. Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt. The timing
Oh,
of it was highly suspect. James went from the 20th through the 27th, which is right in it's the last 2 weeks of July that these people go. And then the La Hayana fires happened August 8th. So that was shortly after. So they could have all gotten together. Oh, let's all go to San Francisco and hang out in these woods and plan this massive directed energy weapon attack on Hawaii. I'm not sure. I can't confirm or deny it, or I can't confirm it, right? But I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, and
anything's possible in this day and age, and nothing really surprises me anymore. Now, enough of bad actors and controlled opposition. The final note here today. Are we too late now in trying to expose what damages have been done? We have thousands dead and many thousand more now out there living with injury. And I do fear that the final death tolls will be in the millions, maybe even the billions. Where is our next battle? And what does the future look like for you?
our next battle is, I mean, who knows at this point, like what craziness could be happening. I'd say everyone needs to be prepared for the worst. I mean, theys have predictively programmed for years that the dollar is going to collapse and that the economy is going to tank and that the energy grids are going to completely go out. So, I'd say just make sure you have some food at home, make sure you have some water, if extra water, gas, things like that, just prepare for emergencies, but just keep living in the present moment as well,
Yeah.
and not living in fear, and just making moves to create community is what I'm advocating for and looking to do. And for me myself, um I created Justintegrity Network, and I am looking to start my own journalism platform uh, through investigative journalism and do podcasts like these, as well as I'm looking to, just create a wellness platform as well, tie it all in together, put it under the same umbrella, and educate those who may have been duped or their loved ones who may have been duped, and helping people detox. I really don't think that these vaccines are the end of the world. I don't think that yes, there are lots of people who are injured and impacted, don't get me wrong, but I, believe that I don't think God is going to like send all these people to hell or anything. Like these people have lessons to learn, and some of them are learning and realize that they've made mistakes, and a lot of people still have those lessons to learn and admit that they were wrong. But as long as people can admit they're wrong and start to detox,
Yeah.
I would say that we are going to be better prepared in the future. So yeah, I'm gonna look to continue my investigative journalism through podcasting, creating documentaries still. Um, I don't know if they're gonna be as long as my 2.5 hour film, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking to do that, and create the wellness platforms and showing people the bridge of the old world to the new world. So,
Yeah.
uh, for those who would like to check out my website, it's justintegrity.net. You can find Project Whistleblower Volumes 1 and 2 embedded into the website. If you would like to watch the combined file, it's all on my Rumble or my BitChute or my Odyssey, or I also have a Unite.live account through Sayer G. So I don't anticipate that one ever getting kicked off because I've talked to Sayer before and he really supports what I'm doing. And for those in the audience who would like to support me, I have created a Give Send Go account as full time pretty much put this documentary together. I haven't been working, and being a whistleblower is not financially rewarding. I threw my entire college career away. So my Give Send Go is givesendgo.com/project whistleblower. Any dollar amount is appreciated, and I'm not here to grift. I'm just here to tell it like it is, that I
Yeah.
put thousands of dollars into this documentary to tell this story. And, I have seen it come back in the sense of so many people have been touched by what I'm doing and really showing people the veil of the gatekeepers, essentially, and like who wants to talk to me versus who doesn't. It's really interesting, so
Yeah.
uh, it really has touched a lot of people. So that's really all I did this for, and I feel that God will reward me for my efforts. As He has seen the weight on my shoulders for those 3.5 years was just incredibly hard to bear, and so He knows that this has been a lot on me, and that the release has been able to just remove that weight. And I look forward to the future as well, and looking to help educate people on what I've seen and moving people away from the allopathic world and into the new free world of holistic healing and healing in general, so
Yeah.
thanks for having me on, Chris.
No, it's been
Justin.
incredible. It has, it really has. And I think people need to be aware, what we've touched upon today is just a small amount of the things you've done. I mean, there's things where you've exposed Twitter for paedophiles and trafficking and so much more. And I would ask people to go and take a look at the work that Justin's put out. I will put the links in the show notes for you to see. And again, yeah, thanks for coming on today, Justin. I'm sure we're going to talk again in the future because there's so much to talk about. We've got so much in common. We're very like-minded, and we both want exactly the same goals moving forward in life. So thanks again. It's been absolutely incredible to talk to you. I know you're a busy man, but let's get out there, keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep talking the truth while we can. And for everyone out there, get this shared, because there's going to come a day that they're going to try and stop us talking. And for now, we just need to get as many people understanding, unfortunately, the very dark world that we live in. But at the end of the day, don't see it all as bad, because we're doing everything we can to bring that light in and make sure that when we move forward, it is for the best interests of humanity. So thank you very much again. And I look forward
Absolutely.
to speaking to you soon.
Thank you, Chris. Much love. And yeah, I will say once again, yeah, to the audience, please just like, share, comment, um, share this with as many people as you can, because like you're saying, Chris, this thing, it could ultimately get censored one of these days where it's just, off the internet. Who knows? They shut the whole world down. So just share it with as many like minds as possible, and even share it with people who may be sucked into this world still of like fear mongering and everything, because if they can hear from the perspective of a young Pfizer scientist who worked directly on these COVID shots, that he won't take them and he doesn't recommend them at all, and that they're complete nonsense. You don't even have to bring in the germ theory versus terrain stuff initially, but
Yeah.
just warn them you're going to be triggered, but I feel like you should hear the story. So thanks again. Much love to you, brother. And I look forward to chatting soon. All right.
Take care, mate. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Thanks, man.